which is Jinxi Yang. She's a PhD candidate at the Chalmers University of Technology with a master in integrated climate science from the University of Hamburg, and also has a bachelor in meteorology. Her expertise and research interests include agent-based modeling, electricity system transition, and energy system modeling. And previously, she was also a research assistant at the National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation in China. So the floor is yours, Jinxi.
Thank you very much, Matt, for the introduction. I will move back to the energy system modeling part from Jacqueline's philosophy area. So today I will give a brief presentation about my work together with my supervisors during the last 3 years during the ENSYSTRA project. And today my presentation is about transition to a low carbon technology system, an agent-based model approach of modeling investment decisions. So first I want to give a brief information about this study. The overall aim of this study is to look at the transition of the energy of the electricity system. And the tool we use for this study is similar to the ESRs present in the morning in work package 1. That is a computational model. But the differences here is that instead of use optimization model, we use the agent-based model approach, where we focus more on the heterogeneity and the limited foresight of the agents, as well as the uncertainties that agents have when they make decisions. And the model we have developed and used is we call it HAPPY. It's heterogeneous agent-based power plant investment model. And with this model, we focused on simulating investment decisions from power companies. And during the last 2-3 years of our work, I think overall the direction of this work has been more focused on model development. So we focus on how we can build up an agent-based model to simulate power companies' investment decision, rather than directly tackle the question that how to achieve a particular mitigation scenarios. So today's presentation will also be more focused on model development aspects. And I want to give 2 examples of the research questions that we have been studied. The first example is we look at how different hurdle rates that company use and how their different expectations for future carbon price have impact of their investment decisions, and how their decisions will in turn impact the transition of the energy system. So just a brief explanation about hurdle rate. Hurdle rate is the investment return that a company is expected. So if, for example, if a company use investment hurdle rate of 8%, it means that they expect one investment need to have 8% at least the return. Otherwise, they will not invest. And the expectation about future carbon price is that in our model, we implement a growing tax scenario, and different companies expect different growth rate. And this means some company will overestimate, some company will underestimate, and some company will relatively have a good estimation about the future carbon price. Yes, so one example of the results we have here is about the development of the install capacity over 80 years. So here we show 3 different cases. On the left side, the first case, where we have homogeneous agents, which means a company here and they all use same hurdle rate, 8%, and they have the same expectations about future carbon price. And in the second case, in the middle one, company have the same expectations about future carbon price, but they use very different hurdle rate values. And in the third case, company use the same hurdle rate value, but they expect different carbon price in the future. And if we compare these three cases, one difference we can see is that in the later two cases with homogeneous agents, we see that the light blue and dark blue, which are wind and nuclear, they start to expand earlier. And the differences between those later two cases is that we can see that in the end, we have more wind, less wind, less gas, but more nuclear compared to this case. The brief explanation is because how low hurdle rate in this case have different impact on the levelized cost of different technology, so they impact them differently. Yes. Okay. So a second example of the research question we have investigated is about the financing of the investment. So why we want to study the financing part? It's because in many energy models, financing is never an issue, because as long as it's optimized to invest, they just assume that the investment will be made. But however, in reality, financing can be an issue because the power plant is capital intense and the payback time is relatively long. Therefore, we have an explicit financial module in our model, and where we keep track of each company's financial status. And with this financial module, we investigate, for example, how do different levels of financial constraint and access to capital impact a company's investment decision, and how do they perform differently in terms of their economic outcome, and how does agents' decision and their performances in turn impact the pace of the transition. One example is shown by this graph, where we investigate the bankruptcy of different companies when we assume different parameter. The parameter we test here is the fraction that has to be paid by a company when they want to make a new investment. So for example, if a wind power plant costs 1 million and we assume F equals to 30%, this means that 30% of this 1 million has to be financed by the company itself, so from their own capitals. And what we can see from the graph here, and the x-axis is the F value from 0% to 50%, and the y-axis is the bankruptcy frequency. And left figure, we grouped different companies by the hurdle rate value they use. And the observation is that in general, we see that companies use a lower hurdle rate value, more likely to go bankrupt. And then if we look at the right side figure, it's a same group of agents or company, but we group them by how their expectation about future carbon price. And the conclusion here is, or observation here is that if a company expects too low or too high carbon price, which is represented by the B value equal to 0 and to 2 here in this study, they are more likely to go bankrupt. And another figure I want to show here is that if we look at the system level, when we look at how emission reduction trajectory looks like when we assume different F value, and just remind you again, F value represents the fraction of investment that has to be paid by a company's own capital. And here we observe that when F value is low, the transition is the reduction you see is faster, which we can say that the emission is mitigated more rapidly when the company is less financial constrained and have more access to capital. Yes, so I want to summarize by some key contributions that I think this study so far has been made. I think this contribution can be twofold. The first is a contribution to a development of model method. As I briefly described, we developed this agent-based model focused on simulating companies' investment decision. And we explicitly have a financial module that keeps track of companies' performances. And we also test different parameter assumptions, for example, the hurdle rate value and the carbon expectation and financial parameters, which are not always fully tested when we run a model. And the second contribution can be categorized as the better understanding of the transition pathway, and where we explored the transition and we focused on the heterogeneity, uncertainty, and financial feedbacks of the agents, and we look at how the decision could be hamper or enhance the transition. And we also illustrate some possible way accelerate the transition. For example, we see that low hurdle rate and high expectation of carbon price in the model have a fast emission reduction. And this means low risk and a clear high carbon price signal could be helpful. And we also illustrate that the financial accessibility is a key factor here that can help speed up the transition. Yes, so that's almost my presentation. I just want to point out that in our study, we also did a lot of other investigations, such as some system dynamics studies, which I don't have enough time to explain in detail. We also investigate how on the agent level, how do different agents invest differently, and how we compare their economic performances as well. And if you are interested, okay, it doesn't show here, but the code and the full description of the model is available online on github.com/happyapm. And also you can find it on Chalmers website. And okay, this should be my email, but it doesn't show here. But if you have any question, you're welcome to contact me. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.